Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome to day 2 of my 7 days of Halloween. Today we're going to be playing with 3 stamp sets. And what I love about Tim Holtz stamp sets is they go together so well. I'm also going to be using some distress oxides to create some backgrounds. And I'm going to show you just a few ideas on how to use these 3 stamp sets. Now the stamp sets that I'm using today are Dearly Departed, Rest in Peace, and Faded Type. Now, Dearly Departed and Rest in Peace are obvious Halloween stamps, and I believe those came out maybe last year. Can't remember specifically, but not too long ago. And then the Faded Type set is a background stamp set. And this background stamp set works for all occasions. You can use them for Halloween backgrounds, you can use them for Christmas backgrounds, or you can just use them for your everyday cards as well. Now the background that I'm creating here, again, I'm using some distress oxides. And the 3 colors that I chose to work with today are Brushed Corduroy, Pumice Stone, and Antique Linen. And these are earth tones. Obviously I'm going for a more muted background, but I'm going to show you ways that you can brighten it up as well. So I created the background by just rubbing the oxides onto my media mat, and then I spritzed it with water, and then I just kind of dabbed my paper into the inks. And I am using heavier cardstock because whenever I work with anything that has a water base, I want to make sure that my paper isn't going to disintegrate on me. Now my intention was to create a couple of cards today, and as you can see I have one 8.5 by 11 cut in half, because when I do layers I like to start out with a bigger piece because then I can trim it to make it look a little bit more organic. But in the end I ended up making 3 cards. So I did speed up the video just a little bit because I didn't want us to be here all afternoon. But I definitely wanted to share with you my process in using all 3 stamp sets to create some layered cards. Alright, so the first card that I'm going to stamp out is going to be my larger card, and it ended up being 5.5 by 7.5 once it was all trimmed and mounted onto my cardstock. The ink that I'm using is my archival ink, and when I started out I wasn't having a lot of success in my stamping, so I went ahead and I stopped the camera and I added some more of the ink to my pad, and as you can see I was now getting some nice crisp images. So I did have to go over my stamp a couple of times, but using my stamping tool, my Misty, it created no problem at all. All right, so the first stamp set that I'm using, of course, is the skeleton. And the skeleton is the Rest in Peace stamp set. And then the flower is coming from Dearly Departed. So as you can see, I've already combined 2 stamps here. Now I decided I wanted to do a little bit of masking, and in the past I would buy masking paper that you would stamp on, cut around, and then it would stick to your paper. But honestly, I have found I can just find some regular copy paper, stamp on it, and it stays in place. I've had no trouble just using regular copy paper, and it saves a little bit of money. I'm at the point now where when I spend money on my craft supplies, I really want to spend it on things that make me happy. Stamp sets make me happy. A lot of the mixed media items make me really happy. So that's really what I was trying to focus on. And I try to stay away from the storage and all of the extra stuff that I can probably do without or make my own. So as you can see, this copy paper worked just fine for me. And I needed the masking for that skeleton because I wanted to use my background stamp. And again, the background stamp that I'm using is Faded Type. And I didn't necessarily want these letters to go onto the face of my skeleton, and that's why I ended up masking it off. But I really wanted to create kind of a busy background, and that was what I was going for. Alright, so now that I have my focal point, again, there's 3 stamps making the focal point. I want to go ahead and just add some smaller stamps around the skeleton face to just finish off the background. So again, I'm using one of the smaller stamps, and that stamp is coming from the Rest in Peace. And then I want to say that I'm going to come in a minute here with the floral wholesale florist tag at the bottom. So it really finishes it off. And once I was happy with the background, I'm going to go ahead and put it aside, and we'll start working on the second background. All right, so the second background we're going to create are the smaller cards. And like I said, originally I was going to start out making 2 larger cards, but it turned out the smaller image, which is the image from the dearly departed, is a little bit small. And I didn't necessarily want to add a lot of extra items around this little character. So I ended up deciding to make 2 smaller cards, which turned out to be A2 cards. So again, just using my background, I'm just using some of my my archival ink, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp my stamp set. Now, as you can see here, I did bring out some distress stain and I rubbed it around his eyeball because I wanted it to look a little bit bloodshot, and the distress stain Festive Berries works great for Halloween blood. I've used this for several years and I just love the results that I get. So once I stamped the first image, I went ahead and just rotated the card to stamp my second image, and then that way I knew that they were going to be exactly parallel to each other, and then I can just cut them right down the middle using my guillotine trimmer. Now this little Bones character, for me at least, has been difficult to color. I know when I first saw it, I love the image and I love some of the results some of the designers got using it, but I wasn't necessarily able to get some of the same results. And that's where I came up with the idea to use the grungy background, because I don't necessarily have to color it in, and just having the grungy background helps to do that. But for these particular cards, I am going to go ahead and color them in using my Copic colors, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. Before I got to my coloring, I wanted to go ahead and frame my card. So again, I'm using this floral stamp that comes from Dearly Departed. And this Dearly Departed stamp set, while it came out in Halloween, it really does create beautiful cards if you don't use the monster. I've created some wonderful note cards just using the floral and the wholesale florist label. It's got some script stamping, and then of course it's got some other stamp sets that are more towards Halloween: caskets and coffins, furnishing undertakers, and then a little statement about bones. But the floral stamp itself is really pretty, and you can use it for more than just Halloween. Okay, so once again, I'm going to go ahead, once I've got my focal points, and again, I've got my monster and my flower, I'm going to go ahead and finish framing this little character. So I came in with the Undertaker stamp right at the bottom, and then I'll just put a couple of smaller stamps on the sides. Now, I know some of you might thinking this is a really, be thinking this is a really busy card, and it is. But this is the look I was going for. I really wanted to fill in the card base because I'm not going to necessarily be adding a sentiment on it. I'm not going to be adding ephemera. Well, I take that back. I do end up adding ephemera at the end. But for the most part, I wanted it to look like a cover of a card, right? So there's a lot of stamps going on, but really they're cohesive and they work together. And that was the result I was going for. Now, as you can see, I still have some white space in on the background. So I got this script stamp, and just holding it in my hand, I just added some script around the image to frame it to finish off the front of the card. Okay, so let's go ahead and start on card number 3. So card number 3, again, I'm using the same focal point, but I wanted to do something a little different. And this is where I am going to use my script background. And I'm going to go a little bit more simple on this one. And when I say simple, it just means I'm not going to add a lot of extra stamps. I originally thought I would use the longer script stamp, but then I decided to use one that was a little bit more horizontal. So I'm just adding some ink, again, just holding it in my hand to just create a background. I could have easily masked my monster, but I chose not to do that because I wanted it to look a little bit more random. And by holding it in my hand, adding some ink, I could get more of a random effect. Now remember, I'm going to trim these cards, so this isn't necessarily the way it's going to look. I can use my trimmer, once I have everything stamped, to to kind of accentuate my focal point or get rid of parts that I don't necessarily want to have on my cover card. And that's where your trimming comes into play. So it's always a good idea to start with a bigger card base, and then trim it down because you want it to look organic. You don't want it to necessarily look like you have blank spaces or edges. And that's why I don't mind cutting off some of the stamped images. And as you can see, I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm not necessarily taking the cardstock off of one side. I'm flipping it around to kind of get the final look that I want. So play with your card bases a little bit when you're trimming them down to get the look that you want. Trimming goes a long way, and you can really change up the design of a card by just trimming off part of it. So I went ahead and finished up the larger card, and I trimmed it down to 5 by 7. And once I have it all matted, it ends up being a 5.5 by 7.5 card. But for these smaller cards, I did want to keep it at an A2 size card. So I'm trimming this down to 3 3/4 and 5 inches. Because I will have a 1/4 inch border, and then I always like to have a white border on my card base. So I am making sure that I am going to trim it down enough where I can get my mat underneath my cardstock. All right, so I got rid of some of those strips of paper, but I did keep the bigger strip that you can see on the right hand side of my screen because we're going to use that in a minute here. So now that I have the trimming down and I've kind of got the look of my cards, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give it some more color. Now, one thing you want to be aware of is if you add oxide ink after you stamp, it's going to mute down your colors a little bit. So be aware of that. So if you don't like that muted effect, you might want to do the stamping after the fact. It really didn't bother me to have that muted effect because I was kind of going for, well, I guess a creepy card. So I didn't mind it to be a little bit muted. And I ended up brightening them up in the end using some of my mica stains. So I'll show you how I did that in a minute. Antique linen, and I'm going to basically cover the whole background with that. And then I'm going to come in with some of the other colors just to add colors. I really didn't have any plan when I was playing along here. I just wanted to add some color to the background. All right, so here is where I'm coming in with my Copic markers. Now, if you don't have Copic markers, you can get this effect using your inks by using a wet paintbrush. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can get these results. But I'm going to go ahead and use my Copic markers to color up the bones and then color up the eye. I'm using some flesh color here. And then I'm going to add some more red to that eyeball just to make it look a little bit more bloodshot. So I'm just coming around with my... and then once I have my eyeball and the red bloodshot all colored in, I went ahead and I went over it with the skin tone markers. But then I decided to come in with some green. I wanted to go ahead and just add some more color to this. So here's where I come in with some green just to give that monster some color. And at that point, I thought that was going to finish the card. I had my monster all colored. I had my background colors. And I could have stopped here. But when I kind of stood back and I looked at it, I thought those letters were just a little bit too, I don't know, too in my face, I guess. I wanted to break up that background a little bit. So that's when I decided to take one of the label stamps from the set and add it at the bottom just as a label to break up that background a little bit. And the label that I ended up using was from the Dearly Departed. And it's the one that says serving to strengthen the bones, nerves, and muscles. And I thought that was really appropriate since there was a bone right there on that character. And this again is where I saved that little scrap of paper that I had trimmed off the 5 by 7 cardstock because I knew I was going to use it, and it still had some of that wonderful grunge on the background. So I just stamped the label on top of that, added some distress ink around it, and then I glued it to my card, and that pretty much finished off that card. So as you can see here, just using the same stamp set for my focal point and using the 2 other stamps that I chose for my backgrounds, I was able to come up with 2 unique backgrounds. And then coloring up, you can kind of choose how you're going to color them up. You can use your distress inks. You can use your Copic colors. There's a lot of ways you can go to color them up. Ultimately, I did a combination, and I used my distressed oxides as well as my Copics. And here I'm just kind of outlining it with my walnut stain to give it a little bit of a shadow. But my point is ultimately you can get different results by using the same 3 stamp sets. So here I'm just finishing off this first card, mounting it on some black cardstock because that's kind of my jam. I like the way that it looks on black cardstock. And then we're going to move on to the next card. All right, so out of the 3 cards that I end up making for you today, this second one is by far my favorite. I love this skeleton. I got him, I want to say last year, because I remember making these oversized tags with him, and they were a big hit. But I just love the skeleton face. And I kind of tinkered with the idea of getting the new stamp set that came out this year, which is also a skeleton face, but I decided actually against it because this one I think does fine for me. And that's where I had the idea of kind of getting out some of my other stamps and to see if I can get some, well, I don't want to say exact results as the stamp that came out this year, but similar, right? So that's where I had the idea to bring in the floral and create my own background. And ultimately, I'm pretty happy with this design. So that's why I decided to only get a couple of the new stamp sets. And I'm gonna save that for you. I'm not gonna tell you which ones I got because I want it to be a surprise. And it will be 2 of the days of my 7 Days of Halloween series. All right, so I'm just adding some background color here. I'm using my antique linen. Again, I'm using my walnut stain, just kind of grunging it up a little bit. And then I'm going to come in to color the colors. Now, I used some purples for the color because as you can see, when I stamped the flower over the skeleton, you can kind of see the lines through it, which to me, it wasn't a big deal. But I wanted to go ahead and use a darker color for the flowers so that way I wouldn't see that skull coming through. Again, I probably could have masked the skull, but I knew I was going to come in with darker colors, so I really didn't worry about it too much. So I have just some purples here that I'm using to outline my flowers. And then typically when I am coloring with my Copic colors, I use colors in 3. I use my darker one for my outline, and then I'll come in with my second medium color to kind of shade in. And I leave a little bit in the middle where I come in finally with the lighter color, and I just kind of blend the whole color combination with that final color. By no means am I an expert at coloring with Copics, but that's kind of how I approach it. And it works pretty well for me. So I'm doing all of the flowers in purple, and then I'm going to do the leaves in green, kind of the same approach. Now, once I have the flowers and the leaves colored, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with the skeleton. In the past, what I've done is I've taken a gray marker and I've just kind of outlined it because the gray outline will make the skeleton look a little bit brighter. And even though it's a pretty grungy card, I still wanted the skeleton to kind of be a little bit brighter. But then I had an idea. Sitting here on my desk was my mica stain, and it's the Iron Gate. And the Iron Gate is more of a gray tone. So I had the idea, well, why don't I see how that will look if I just spray that right onto the skeleton face? Oh my God, you guys, it came out so good. Not only does it give you that mica glittery look, but it kind of gives it a muted gray tone. And it really made the skeleton look, well, dead. I mean, that's after all what he is, right? But it really did a nice effect. So ultimately, I was pretty happy with the distressed mica stain. And once I started playing with the stains on these cards, that's where I had the idea to kind of add them to the other cards as well. Originally, I wasn't going to play with my micas for this video, but I was really happy with the results I was getting with playing with them. So I have them right on my desk here, and I just kind of grab them whenever I want. But the results were pretty awesome. So after I sprayed the skeleton, which is what I'm doing here, I got my my rag that I have, my craft rag, and I just kind of wiped up some of the excess, and then I gave it a good, nice dry. But God, look at that skeleton. Didn't he come out great? I just think he looks awesome. Now remember, when I'm taping these videos, I always have an idea of where I'm going with the card, kind of an idea with the stamp sets, but I don't necessarily know where it's going to take me. So I always say, just get out your supplies and start playing. I ended up making 3 cards here, and one of them ended up being my favorite. And while I like the other 2, I certainly love this one I'm working on right here. I ended up getting some of my ephemera pieces, and I added that eyeball, and then I added that number 31 for the Halloween card. And this card is just so fun. I just love the way it turned out. It's got so much detail, so much to look at. And as you can see, it really wasn't that difficult to put together. So don't be afraid to pull out your stamp sets, combine them, see what works well together, and you're going to turn out some awesome results. I guarantee it. All right, so I mounted this one onto the black cardstock, and then I trimmed it down, and then I was ready to work on my 3rd card. Now, like I said, originally I was only going to make a couple of cards. I hadn't planned on making the 3rd card, but since I had already had it stamped out, I went ahead and I decided to work on this one as well on camera, and then that's again why I sped up the video, just because I didn't want us to be here all afternoon. So I kept the 3rd one somewhat simple, but as you can see, again, I ended up playing with some of my mica stains in the end. All right, so let's pull out that 3rd cardstock and let's see what we can do with it. So the 3rd cardstock already has some colors, right? So it's got the background with a smaller card, the distress oxides that we added to the card base are really standing out. So I decided to go ahead and just color up the flowers, and again, the flowers are very subtle. It's just they've already been trimmed off, and being a smaller card base, you're not seeing a lot of the flower, just part of it. So it didn't take me too long to color up these flowers. And then once I have the flowers colored, then that's when I started playing with those distressed mica stains. I just wanted to see how it would look to add a little bit of color. So that's what I ended up doing on this 3rd card. And then as you're going to see also, I added it to a couple of the other cards as well, just because I started having such fun working with my mica stains. Now, as I finish up this card, I want to remind you that I am doing a 7 Days of Halloween series, and I will be doing a giveaway at the end of the series. So probably about a week or 2 after the last video airs, I'll come back and I'll do a giveaway. And I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet, but in order to qualify for the giveaway, you're going to want to definitely leave a comment in the description box below, and I'm going to have a little link where you can enter my giveaway. I find it easier to manage my giveaways that way, so don't forget to look for the link to be entered into the drawing for my giveaway. Like I said, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, but it should be something fun. And if you are new to my channel and you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. And if you've enjoyed my video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. I've been doing the 7 Days of Halloween series for several years now, and it is my favorite. And I love making Christmas cards, don't get me wrong, but the 7 Days of Halloween series is something I will always do just because I really, really enjoy it. A lot of my videos these days are live. I just don't have a lot of time to tape these days, but I do make an effort to continue to do this series because I know that I love it, and I've had several people that tell me they love it as well. So as always, I'll leave lists of everything that I've used for these cards, and I'll leave links to the store. And if you've enjoyed the video, again, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. All right, guys, I hope that you've enjoyed my 3rd video, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for stopping by.